I'm so happy to have Emma Stern here today. Emma, thank you so much for joining me. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I'm excited to chat with you, Todd. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. I first saw you on an email that I received from Yoga Alliance, and you were offering a workshop, an online workshop around the theme of trauma informed yoga. And that got me really piqued my interest, and then hence the chance to reach out to you. So, first of all, I really appreciate you joining and being open and willing. And maybe that's a good place to start. Can you tell me how you first got started working or alongside with Yoga Alliance?
Yeah, so thanks for asking about that, Todd. So the Yoga Alliance opportunity was really exciting. It was very much years in the making. So a little about me is that I'm a therapist. I hopefully will be licensed by the time this podcast comes out. I'm in the process of waiting for my paperwork to be
Oh, wow.
approved. That's sort of the last step, but maybe not. I know we're probably going to be out in a week, so that might be me holding my breath a little. But
Wishful thinking.
I am an almost licensed therapist, and I've been a yoga teacher much longer. I've been teaching yoga 9 years, and I think through my own journey, I found yoga before mental health. I started doing yoga probably 20 years ago at this point, and just noticed I started feeling better. I started responding differently to things. Like a lot changed just being in touch with my body. And that piqued my interest in mental health. And when I was in my first year of grad school, I started studying trauma informed yoga. And it was this beautiful platform. A lot of the approaches I had been exposed to were a little more clinical. And what I really struggled with was there was kind of a disconnect between this way of providing trauma informed care and public yoga studio settings, which was where I was working. So I got really curious. I took a bunch of trainings and I really tried to apply my graduate school coursework into this idea of harm reduction in studio settings. And over the course of time, I had lots of like very emotional Instagram and blog posts in 2020. I was finishing up school and had nothing to do. I was suddenly, only a Zoom yoga teacher with much more time. And I just started talking a lot about harm reduction in studio spaces. And someone who is now a very dear friend and colleague, Keisha Courtney, happened to see some of the just essays I was writing and putting out there and asked me if I wanted to do a blog for her organization, The Driven Yogi, which is a learning platform. And that evolved into a lot more work together. Keisha gave me the opportunity to design my own course around harm reduction in studio settings and trauma informed care. And kind of the pivotal moment, I think, this year, Yoga Alliance invited us to present on that. We had a 3-part series, and it was just very, very exciting. It was so inspiring to share approaches to harm reduction and with like this big audience that was super receptive and wanted these tools. So it's been a really
Amazing.
exciting journey.
That's
Yeah,
so cool.
yeah.
That's so cool.
Hmm.
Can you just define for us harm reduction in relation
Yeah,
to a yoga studio?
absolutely. And I'll explain trauma informed care too, because I think it kind of all goes together. So, the idea of trauma informed care is that it is an approach to harm reduction, which I'll get to, that essentially operates with the understanding of trauma. So, you've learned XYZ about trauma. You have kind of an understanding of how trauma shows up in the body, how it might show up in other dynamics, especially power dynamics. And with this understanding, you make conscious choices to reduce harm. And, the harm reduction lens is so perfect in yoga because that's ahimsa, right? It's
Yes.
nonviolence. So it really is part of the spiritual practice as well. And it's not to be perfect, right? No one's perfect. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes as teachers. But the idea is to commit to reducing the harm that is kind of inevitable just in being human, and especially understanding that the yoga practice is interoceptive in nature, which means it encourages us to connect to what's showing up in our body. And we've learned that that's where our emotions live, right? That's where all of our past experience resides. So when we are sitting with these sensations of distress, a lot of the asana shapes, right? Chair pose, that's not comfortable. It's a very distressing shape. it's going to bring stuff up. Yeah. So if we can commit to harm reduction while folks are doing what is essentially very therapeutic work, it's going to provide a little more safety for whatever may come up.
That makes sense. Can you frame then how you would teach, say, chair pose in a class where you have harm reduction as the lens that you're working through? Because like in a lot of yoga practices, the idea of like, I'm going to put you in chair pose and make you hold it for an unreasonable amount of time, generate a
Yes.
ton of heat, make you question everything. Why am I here? What am I doing? How do you teach chair yoga, chair pose, which is asana,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
intense posture, fierce
Fierce
posture,
awkward pose. Yeah.
fierce awkward?
Yeah.
How do you do that in a way that you aren't instigating trauma if you're working with someone that is struggling and or having a challenge in this
Yeah.
department?
So I love that question. And I think what I love most, and I have a feeling this is going to be a theme in our conversation, is there's no right answer.
Okay.
A lot of it has to do with what is reducing harm in a given moment. So for me, my background is power vinyasa. And I found in my own personal body, and I think for a lot of folks, sitting with stillness when I first started practicing yoga was so much. And a lot of that is kind of a result of where I was in my emotional journey. Like having breath to movement practices gave me a safe way to connect to my body. So that kind of actually, I think, also came from intensity, right? Having these sensations that are so in your face made it so I could connect. So I totally teach chair pose for like 20 minutes. I think it's actually a joke with most of my students. It's the posture that never ends. My approach to harm reduction, which might be different than another teacher's, is agency. You do not have to be here forever. You get to choose when you're taking breaks. And that is your wisdom, right? Like that is your wisdom that's telling you, can you stay? Can you back off? Can you soften the shape? Like, do you need to come out a little? Do you want to soften your shoulders? It's really encouraging students to trust exactly what's showing up in their body. Like, I'm here, but I'm not in your body. You are the expert on yourself.
Nice. Did I hear you say correctly a 20-minute chair pose?
Yeah, that was an exaggeration, but I
Okay.
probably keep students in it close to 2 minutes. Like, I am a big fan of chair pose, and then it's like let's lift the heels, let's throw in some lat pulls. But what's really cool about the yoga practice is that in asana in particular, it gives us the physical capacity to learn to regulate our stress response. And I think I love chair pose. I love that that comes up in the first 10 minutes of us talking. I think that's very much a reflection of me as a person. But if you can learn to regulate and take care of your body in chair pose, what a metaphor for
Yeah.
what you will bring into your
Yeah.
life and other aspects of this yoga practice, which in its nature is a beautiful practice of how we show up in the world.
That's so cool, Emma. You mentioned that you started with yoga, but now you're right on the precipice of receiving
Yeah.
your license to work as a licensed therapist. Does that mean like a licensed psychotherapist? Are we in that route?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will be what is in Oregon called a professional counselor. In California, where I started, it's professional clinical counselor. And in some other states, it has different names. It's fascinating how across state lines,
Mm,
names change of different types of therapy. But I specialize in working with trauma, which I think really was something that sparked from my passion for yoga and just learning at how much physical practices and somatic practices can be healing. Also, I think with yoga philosophy, there's a lot of kind of beauty we can make of our experiences, right? Like transforming them into something greater than the self. So, yeah, that's been kind of the biggest piece of my journey through the past I guess I started grad school like 7 or 8 years ago, which is
wow.
wild.
Wow.
So it's really exciting that it's at this chapter where,
Oh, congratulations.
yeah,
That's amazing.
thank you.
You said you started taking trauma informed workshops or trainings in that arena, and then you decided that you wanted to then pursue your counseling degree or your master's. Is that how it kind of started?
It was actually just yoga and then
Mm.
my master's. So kind of what happened was I was working in the nonprofit world, which is unfortunately in a lot of cases very exhausting. I loved the work I was doing. I worked for a nonprofit that did a lot of work around immigrant rights and reform in legislation. It was primarily lawyers, and I was on the administrative side of things, not being a lawyer. And this organization did absolutely incredible work. However, I was burnt out, and a lot of the people I was working with were exhausted and burnt out. And it was ironic because I was already teaching yoga at that point, and I saw a lot of my yoga students who, ironically, were also in different types of legal reform. Um, I saw the way in which this practice was keeping them from being burnt out. And it just really inspired me that I wanted, as I kind of progressed in my career, to do something more similar to yoga. And I was a full time yoga teacher for a while. Unfortunately, doing power vinyasa, I do think there's ways to make it sustainable. It's very hard economically, and it's a lot on your body. But, as we transform in our practice, there's ways to do it. But I didn't think, as someone who had this very, what's authentic to me is a very rigorous connection with the asana practice, that
Yeah.
wasn't sustainable as full time work forever. So I shifted into learning more about somatics. Like, why is it that this practice is really helping people? And that piqued my interest in somatic psychology. So my master's was a somatic focused program. And it was like all of these seemingly disconnected things that meant a lot to me suddenly were being pieced together in a puzzle of, wow, this is so powerful, this connection we have to our bodies. So
Amazing.
transformative.
Very cool. Can you
Thanks.
can you define the word somatics for us?
Absolutely. And I love that you asked this question because it's this word we all throw out, and I think it kind of gets mystified. Soma is it's either Latin or Greek. I should probably Google and double check, but it's the root word soma means body, and somatics is essentially anything that is a mind body connection. So yoga, tai chi, it could also be Pilates, it could be bike riding, it could be walking, meditation, of course, but it's anything that allows us to integrate our awareness of what's happening in our body. And what's so fascinating is the power to kind of shift our experience when we have that awareness. So a lot of people have noticed that that's where real therapeutic change can happen, connecting the cognitive with the feeling experience.
That's cool, Emma. I when you mentioned the word somatics having the root of soma, I just recently reread Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you've read that or
I
remember.
have.
And
Yeah, I have.
there's a drug used in this like Brave New World called soma that like just makes everything
Mm-hmm.
like perfect, I guess. And then, but it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Have you heard about in the Rig Veda how there's the soma in the Rig Veda and the Vedas? There's this idea that soma was some sort of beverage that was used, and there's all the speculation about what was in the beverage in some of the rituals in old time India. Have you ever heard any connections between that and the word somatics as we're using it nowadays?
No, but I would love to more because honestly, there are so many ways in which, and this is a whole tangent, but the West likes to pretend that it invented these things and it didn't, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
honestly, being somatic is a tradition in so many different cultures. It's not this amazing new development, it's
Yeah.
this innate ability that so many humans knew about. And unfortunately, we are rediscovering because of disconnection that has happened in culture and over time. But I would definitely love to learn more about that. I'm going to actually write down a little post it, and that will be
Oh,
something I research after our conversation.
well, I can't wait to hear what you come up with. I've been, I,
Yeah.
I thought it was really funny when I read the Huxley book and Soma appeared again. I'm like, all this obviously was reading some Veda literature, Vedic literature.
Yeah.
That's cool. So then when you get your certificate and or you're, officially licensed, What are you hoping to do? What's your dream?
Well, it's funny because not a lot changes for me in Oregon, and this kind of goes into how different states have different ways of operating with therapists. But I'm already a private practice. The main thing that changes is right now I work with a supervisor, and once I'm licensed, I don't have to work with a supervisor anymore. I'm
Hmm,
sure I'll still call her often for consultation, but I won't have that built into my schedule.
got it.
So actually a lot stays the same, which is really, it's exciting for me. When I was in California, I used to live in California, you can't be a private practice as an associate. So it's something you have to work up to. And this has really been for me, like, I don't know if the dream is the word, but really the goal, because being in private practice sort of gives you the flexibility to support yourself, sustain yourself, but also kind of design your caseload, right? Like, how many pro bono clients do I have the capacity to see? So it makes it a lot easier for me to work and be aligned with my values. And I
Nice.
love it. I really love being a therapist.
It sounds amazing. I know
It
I'm
is.
super intrigued. That's cool. I I keep talking about this on almost every podcast lately because I'm still reading it, but I'm reading The Body Keeps the Score by Van der Kolk right
Amazing.
now. And it's
Hmm.
just a transformative book. I'm finding it absolutely fascinating. And I love that as a psychiatric doctor, he really is a big fan of somatic therapies and yoga and breath work and Tai Chi and everything else. Can you tell me anything that you've gleaned from reading that book?
Oh, so much. I mean, I think that's a book everyone should read because really the whole idea the body keeps the score. Your body takes memories of things. And that's kind of what happens in trauma is that our bodies are actually these incredibly resilient vessels. I think we have this kind of misunderstanding of a trauma response as a bad thing, but it's actually a beautiful thing that keeps you sustainable in a situation that really should have never happened to you. Bodies have evolved to respond in certain ways. It might be dissociating, it might be fight or flight that we look at in a certain way, but that is what keeps you able to move forward in your life.
Mm,
Now, where we kind of get sticky is where our body holds a memory of those things. So a situation that feels similar might bring up that residue. It might make you move into fight or flight a little quicker. It might make you dissociate. So the idea is that through working on our mind body connection, we kind of take that power back. It's
mm.
not saying it's perfect. We flip a switch, but over time, we find a little more spaciousness to kind of feel, okay, I'm feeling these feelings, but I'm going to look at this situation and kind of decide how I want to respond. And that book is just so amazing because I think it brought this knowledge, which again, a lot of different practices had this knowledge and kind of got lost in the West, but it brought this knowledge into a public arena by a doctor, right? Someone who's super respected. And it is just kind of this big wake up culturally like, oh, wow, this is what's happening. This is this way in which a lot of us are suffering.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
saying all
Great
that.
book.
I know I keep wanting to try to pull that out of people to get all
Yeah.
the listeners to actually read it. It's a powerful one for
Yeah.
sure. That's
It
cool.
is. The other books I would add, I really
Please,
love Peter
please.
Levine. Peter Levine
Mm,
writes a book called In an Unspoken Voice, which I think is a great companion to Body Keeps the Score. And Gabor Mate has a book right
mm.
now called The Myth of Normal, which is incredible. So, really good companions. And all of these authors really stress the importance of mind body connection and somatic work in our healing.
Yes, I just finished the one by Gabor Mate. That was
Yeah,
amazing for sure.
he's
Yeah,
great. Yeah.
took me a little while,
Mhm.
but it was good.
Yeah, it's long. I have a joke with a friend that I actually still I haven't finished the newest ones. I've read a bunch of older books, but it is like the book that it just takes a long time to digest. So
Yes.
I'm about halfway through. My friend is like two chapters through, and it's like the book of the year. We're going to be processing it through the next year.
I can
Yeah,
agree to I agree with you on that. Did you
yeah.
do you teach trauma informed trainings for yoga teachers?
Yeah, so right now through the Driven Yogi, which I can actually give you the website. I forgot to do that, but I think if you Google Driven Yogi, it's the first thing that comes up. I have
Cool.
an online training, and also through the Driven Yogi or through myself, I can offer continuing ed. That's something we do with studios sometimes. My preference is definitely I love working with teachers on harm reduction and you just in public classes, right? It feels like a normal studio class, like for a lot of I think teachers who are starting to practice harm reduction, but it's slight differences in how that class happens. So I teach right now, I'm only teaching 2 weekly classes, one public one in Portland and one online through my Zoom. And those are both trauma informed. And the idea of trauma informed is it's harm reduction, right? It's not perfect. I'll have moments I'll mess up like anyone else, but there's a commitment made to I want to recognize the positional power I have as a teacher of a yoga class, and I want to really honor your agency, what you know about your body, and how you take care of yourself. That has to be, or for me, that's the first priority.
Nice. How if I wanted to take your course, is it Zoom live? Is it recorded videos or is it a combination? How is the structure of it?
Yeah, so the course through the Driven Yogi is an online pre-recorded course. I also have a few pre-recorded webinars, which are free for Yoga Alliance members. That's going to be more introductory. But there's a 3-part series Yoga Alliance members can access in the archives.
Cool.
And studios can hire me to do live trainings as well.
Nice.
So it's kind of dependent on, I think, learning styles and what makes the most sense for what people are looking for.
So if I wanted to have you teach our studio trauma informed training, that means you would only be working with yoga teachers per se. Is that correct?
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
you do that over the Zoom or you fly in? How does that work?
Yeah, it's really studio's preference. It could be either.
Mhm.
I would say I don't think there's a huge difference in whether it's Zoom or in person. It's nice being in person, right? Because there's kind of a felt sense of just
Yes.
what is happening
Yeah.
in the room that can be hard on Zoom. But Zoom has benefits too. What I really like about doing trauma trainings on Zoom is that the reality is this is hard material. You might need to take a
Yeah.
break. And if you're in
Yeah.
the comfort of your own home, you could
Yeah.
turn off your camera, you could
Yeah.
pet your dog. That's my regulation, right? Do whatever you need.
Yeah.
So there are benefits to the online platform. There's kind of pros and cons with each.
Yeah. I hear you. Agreed. Yeah. The not needing to
Yeah.
travel, the all that stuff is huge, but you're right, the in-person element is amazing. What was your experience in relation to COVID and now being in person? Did you have any sort of revelations in that process of being separated and then having the opportunity and ability to be in studio with people?
That's a great question. I think for so many of us, just like major shifts and reflections happened. For me, I think really my teaching changed tremendously. Pre COVID, I was more alignment focused. And post COVID, I'm much more somatic awareness. And the trauma informed piece of the teaching is so much more important to me. Like, this is a practice that helps you support your nervous system.
Yes.
Um, and another big change is I don't touch people anymore. So prior to
Mhm.
COVID, and I've looked at that a lot. It's really fascinating because I think some of it was my own like internalized pressure of this is what a yoga teacher should do. This is what studios like. And I've really sat with it. And it's not that I dislike hands-on adjustment or don't think they could be trauma informed. I do think it's possible. There's a lot of education around consent and a lot of ways in which we can explore what that looks like in classes.
Yep.
However, for me, I've noticed that it feels like the harm reduction is just not touching because even if you have consent, there's so many factors. It's such an intimate
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
So it's not like I think it's a bad thing, but it's just easier for me to say there's a lot that can happen. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
take this piece outside of my
Yeah.
teaching.
It is a fascinating
Yeah,
topic to really think about
totally.
what kind of actual dynamic is occurring in this process of touching this individual. When you're offering,
Absolutely.
say, one-on-one counseling sessions, and if somebody's in your office, do you, from a professional therapeutic approach or perspective, try to not do hands-on? Like say if someone's crying and you think, oh, I could just go over and give them a hug. But from a professional perspective, is that something that we try not to do, even though we might know it might help, but then we are careful because we think, but then what if it gets read the wrong way? What is that approach in that sort of professional environment?
That's another great question. Ironically, I'm online. My practice is fully telehealth, so it's not
That
maybe
solves that.
for me,
That
right? It
solves
solves it.
that.
Yeah, yeah. But I really think what's so challenging is there's not a right answer. And I
Yeah.
did graduate from, there's only 3 somatic graduate programs in the country. And we were taught ways we could use touch as a modality as somatic therapists. And I do believe it's incredibly powerful. I had a therapist at one point who had a massage background and used touch, and I had huge, therapeutic breakthroughs. Like it was a very powerful experience. What I will say is we had a lot of safety. That relationship had really been built. And I think what's so challenging is that it's such a subjective thing, right?
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
might be moments where that hug is going to be so healing, right? Or, even just putting your hand on someone's shoulder, something like that. And it also, if they don't feel like they're able to express a boundary, because I think what's so complex is a lot of folks with trauma also might have kind of people pleasing tendencies.
Yeah.
So they'll be the least likely to say, stop, I don't like that.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think as
Yeah.
practitioners, really um, working to build safety, working to give folks agency, always checking in, right? Is this okay? Are you sure this is okay? But also trying to intuit that space between what someone's saying and what you suspect is showing up for them. It's
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah, it is. Great answer though. I like the way you explained all that. If so, you've been practicing yoga for 20 years, myself as well. And say you flashback, or not, maybe that's the wrong word to use. You think about 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and then the way our culture has been shifting, moving, changing, evolving. Can you think of something that occurred 20 years ago that now you look at and go, that definitely has changed?
Yeah, so many things. I mean, I think something I feel really grateful about, it's kind of ironic, but I started doing yoga. I went to a performing arts charter school, and yoga was my gym class, which was amazing.
Is that like high school
And
days? Is that
yeah, high
yeah,
school.
okay. Yeah, that's cool.
um,
And you said
it was very
Was that
cool.
East Coast? Was that
Yeah, it was in Western Mass. The school is Pioneer Valley Performing Arts Charter School. It's still there. Incredible school. I feel very lucky to have had
cool?
a very different kind of high school experience there. Um, and my yoga teacher in high school, it was really a special experience. Like yoga was kind of our PE credit, but we would have homework, like journal about the Yoga Sutras. And it was a really cool way to be exposed to this. It was
That's cool.
very,
Yeah.
yeah, it was very meaningful. And I think, yeah, so it was kind of the exception to I think a lot of what was happening 20 years ago. But I think one of the main things is a lot of, not consent around touch, not giving students agency. And for me myself, I remember, I'm very competitive and athletic, so I would go into these classes, and if a teacher was encouraging, sometimes you just have to push through it. I'd be like, okay. And, I don't necessarily I have some experiences I look back on kind of shudder, but most of them I was fine. And I think that goes back to, as teachers too, our students are incredibly resilient.
Mm,
I still believe in fully practicing harm reduction when we can, and also honoring our
mhm.
students are really strong. They have survived a lot.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I definitely have some moments from earlier on in my time practicing yoga that I kind of shudder when I think about. Um, but it's really cool because a lot of the teachers I practiced with early on, I see them making changes, right? And that's to me a true commitment to the yoga practice.
Yeah, I
It's easy
agree.
to attach, right? Like sometimes when I do trauma trainings, people really struggle with um, consent, ironically, around touch. But there's this idea of I've been teaching so long, my students know me, like it's going to interrupt my flow and cadence to be constantly asking for consent. And I think there's kind of a sitting with it that needs to be done. Like, yeah, this is going to change things, and kind of processing. And
Yeah.
this is the work.
Yeah.
But it's really inspiring for me when I see folks I practiced with early on making, especially like, I really think about my first yoga teacher, Jasmine Tarkeshi, who's so amazing and really lives this practice. I practiced with her when I was in the Bay, and it was just so beautiful to see ways in which she's made subtle shifts in her training, or teaching, excuse me, as time has gone on. And I see the curriculum, right? How the curriculum and that changing training has changed a little bit. It's Lotus Land SF now. It's Laughing Lotus when I did the practice. And yeah, it's just so cool to me to see people really living out these values and being open to change.
Yeah. I agree with you because it's a sink or float type of situation, right? Like
Yeah.
if we're extremely resistant to change, it's only a matter of time before, that last woman or last man standing idea. Like sometimes we put a situation like I'm the last one holding out,
Yeah,
and that's a badge of honor. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Like, I don't know. Then
it
there's the
is.
element of just changing with society,
Yeah.
evolving with society feels really good too, to like be all talking about these things and moving along together. It can actually be a fairly fun and engaging process to embrace
Yeah.
change.
Absolutely. Oops, sorry, I just heard my echo. I got thrown off.
No, it's okay. No
But
worries at all. And so when you said that, I know, right? It does that when you hear yourself. Isn't that the
so
worst when you
funny.
hear somebody on the phone and like everything you say, you hear yourself back, you're like, this is not going to work. I got to call you back.
Totally.
Yeah. When you said like
Yeah.
when you do these trainings that sometimes, anytime, let me start over. So I remember Vander Kolk in his book, he says something like, nobody wants to remember trauma, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not a fun thing. Like we're not,
Hmm.
oh, I can't wait to wake up tomorrow and start digging
Yeah,
in on remembering all of the
totally.
stuff that's happened. But the power that comes from acknowledging it, talking about it, and letting like acknowledging basically instead of stuffing it down.
Hmm.
Um, when you do these trainings, you said that sometimes people like have a hard time processing because we're talking about things that are difficult. Can you explain a little bit about your methodology or technique of teaching when these sort of things come up?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So, even prior to teaching, something I like to share when I do these trainings is that when I was first exposed to trauma informed yoga, my initial response wasn't, yeah, I can't wait to do this. It was, no, that doesn't work in the studio. That I can't do that in my class.
Mm,
And it was a lot of intimidation and shame around, I'm not doing it that way. Does that mean I'm hurting people?
mm,
It really, yeah, I had to do a lot of reflection on, okay, I have these tools now. What can that look like? Like, how can I apply this? Because I think a lot of the earlier trauma trainings and some just trauma trainings in general, they're more, and that's why I say like harm reduction instead of this is going to be perfectly executed,
mm,
because to truly, truly be providing trauma treatment, it's clinical. It's not going to happen in a public yoga space where you don't have control of the environment. So, in a public yoga setting, how can we work towards harm reduction, right? There's still so many factors that are outside of our control. It's not a clinical setting where I have this safe office, and that's the irony is even in the safe office, things can happen. But when I first was exposed to this lens, I had to really sit with and process what it meant for me as a teacher. And this comes up a lot when I do the trainings. And I'd like to say I handle it perfectly every time. I don't. I think it's been a learning curve for me, not to get defensive if someone doesn't want to ask for consent. I've definitely had moments where I've had to like take a step back and be like, how can I be curious about why this person
Mm-hmm.
is feeling challenged by this lens? And how can I support, kind of what they're already doing? And where can they get curious about kind of the disconnect? Because there's a lot of, it's sort of like a fragility response, like well, and I would also add, so my approach to the training is, anti-racism is part of it, right? A lot of this overall harm reduction work is part of it. And it was kind of surprising to me the first time I offered this training and kind of experienced a fragility response. And I had to sit back and be like, I had a fragility response the first time I saw this work, because I think the idea of harming folks can be immobilizing.
Mm.
We don't want to hurt people. So sometimes when we're exposed to a platform that might suggest what we're doing is inadvertently hurting people, we freeze.
Yeah.
So, ironically, the yoga practice in itself provides a lot of the tools for working with this, right?
Yeah.
Somatic
Yeah.
attendance to what's showing up in our nervous system.
Yes.
But it's hard. Sometimes in the trainings, like if I suggest, I'll stop and I'll be like, hey, do you want to check in, see how everyone's doing? And it's really interesting. Like I'd say actually more common, because we're not talking about traumas per se as much as harm reduction. It's that fragility that comes in versus a memory. With that, I definitely, they both happen, right? I think the two things that happen are the fragility, and then sometimes after the fact, folks sharing, wow, I have this background. And usually I find that folks, and again, it's just who chooses to disclose. So I don't know if it's everyone, but folks who choose to disclose to me that they have a trauma background are often like, I'm really grateful this work is being done. Thank you for thinking about these things.
Mm.
So, it brings up so many different things for different people. And I'm
Yeah.
only aware of what people choose to tell me. I'm sure there's more that's
Of
happening.
course. Right. Oh,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
interesting that you brought up, say, the folks that identify of having a trauma filled background coming into
Hmm.
becoming a trauma informed teacher, working with that lens
Yeah.
versus somebody who doesn't have that background or maybe is not aware that they have that background or that you see a relative difference between those two components. It makes sense. I mean, because like
Yeah.
that saying, who feels it knows it, right? If you have felt
Yeah.
it, you know it. But to try to explain it to someone who hasn't is so difficult. So, but at the same time, I understand we want to be careful, not like, you know, homogenize it into this idea. But what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, and I just think it's so complex because the irony, I feel like we need language beyond trauma, right? Because
Mhm. Yeah.
we have our quote unquote capital T traumas, things we all know are really bad. But also, trauma is subjective. It's how your nervous system responds to something. So, what's traumatic for me might not be traumatic for you, and vice versa. And I would say we have all experienced nervous system dysregulation. Every human has experienced kind of what
Yeah.
starts to happen when you lose connection to your body and feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So I think it's so fascinating. The statistics on trauma are so high. And
Oh,
yeah, we
it's
really
like so
do. It's
eye-opening.
terrifying.
It's
Yeah.
really terrifying.
Yeah. To me, it's more, and this is an assumption, this is not a fact, but I kind of think we all have some trauma. It's folks who are aware and have kind of started looking at their own
Yeah. Yeah.
that can look at these tools and be like, wow, this really
Mhm.
means a lot to me.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And, even with that, it's so interesting. Sometimes we'll get the feedback like, I've survived XYZ. Like, you don't need to hold my hand. It's so
Yeah.
subjective how
Yeah. That's a
different
good point.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, being human's complicated. It's really complicated.
Oh my gosh. That makes me think about if I try, I don't want to play devil's advocate, but if there was a
Oh,
devil's
you can.
advocate, okay. If
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
devil's advocate response of like, the world is going a little too much in the direction of being hyper aware of, say, trauma. Like, for example, I was driving here to meet
Hmm.
with you, and a bolt of lightning hit close enough by that my car vibrated, and I felt my body kind of like, huh, like I had that like
Yeah.
reaction. And then I'm like, like, was that trauma? And, and are we getting too hypersensitive to trauma, or is it that we've been so desensitized from acknowledging that everything has some sort of impact on our life, that now we're starting to acknowledge the impact everything does have? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And the latter, I mean, it all resonates with me. The latter really resonates with me hugely. Yeah, and I think we're just getting so much more aware of our bodies that we need more language. We
Yeah,
need more
that's a good
language
point.
and
Yeah.
understanding. And it's kind of interesting because trauma's become so trendy, right? That folks often ask me how I feel about that. And overall, I feel good about it because
Yeah.
more understanding means more work is being done and there's more general care. Does that mean that there's not, expressions of trauma work that make me nervous? Nope, there's absolutely that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and also, with this general narrative shifting towards an awareness, I think there's a lot of space for change. And there's also, it's just so complex, right? I think we're
Yeah.
just getting
Yeah.
so much more aware of what we don't know and what our bodies feel.
I agree. It'll be fascinating 20 years from now to look back and
Totally.
see, is our conversation like, what will this conversation sound like, 10,
Yeah.
20 years?
Absolutely. And
The
I
evolution is
listen to
incredible. Yeah.
conversations I've
Yeah.
had and I cringe, right? I mean, I think we
Yeah.
all do because we learn so much more. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think some of the work is just being curious, being open to
Yeah.
change. And
Yeah.
like, I'm really glad that this work is being done in a large scale.
I
So I think
agree.
that's a good thing overall. Yeah.
I agree. I was yesterday, I was trying to mull over some different questions I could come up for with you. And I was listening to Lithium on XM, and it's like
Yeah.
90s grunge.
Nice.
And there's a
I love
band,
that station. Yeah.
right, there's a band
Yeah.
Dinosaur Jr., which I don't know if you've heard of them. And they have a song,
I have.
a lyric that says, I feel the pain of everyone, and then I feel nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I've always liked that song, but I think
Mhm.
maybe I could relate to that because I remember as like a teenager looking at the world and feeling like, 'cause I went through a relatively like teenage experience of like looking at the world and going, well, how do I fit into this? And that seems like a lot of
Mhm.
gnarly stuff has happened, and
Yeah.
how do I reconcile my existence with all of this crazy stuff that's happened? And then that the second line, then I feel nothing. Is
Mm.
that like a dissociative experience, or to not feel anything after feeling the pain of everyone? I don't know. I just keep thinking about that. Like, that just seems like a really interesting lyric. If I know it's, I don't know if that's fair to throw that at you right now, but how would you, in your own experience, reconcile that line?
Well, I am a big fan of 90s
Okay,
grunge
cool.
and angst. I think a lot of us who grew up, for me, it was more the thousands, but grew up in the 90s and thousands, there was a lot of toxic things happening culturally and also having a turbulent childhood, right? We look at, and I think teenagers are in their feeling brain, right? Their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed and feelings are so strong. Like you're like a sponge. So, kind of making sense of feeling, especially like you're naturally too part of that prefrontal cortex not being fully developed. You're kind of self-centered as a teenager. It's just how I certainly was, right? I think it's
Yeah,
how a lot of us
yeah,
were.
yeah.
We feel the weight of our world. We do have, I think, a lot of empathy at that age too. We
Mm,
feel it's like that both and. You can be very in your experience as well as looking at things and how they might make people feel, because your feelings are so strong that you feel so much. And also, yeah, that numbing. To me, it's a deeply somatic lyric. It's a
It
deeply
is.
aware
Yeah.
lyric. Yeah, totally. Like there's so much
There's a lot to it.
potency.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I could. For me, it's more an appreciation, which is I think what you have of like,
Yeah.
wow. And to me, I think it's showing kind of the right culture for holy crap, so much is happening. I feel so much. There's so much suffering. And we use the term suffering. It's kind of a losing game. I see my clients do this where it's like
Yeah.
there's always someone who's had it worse than I have.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
like there
Yeah.
will always be someone who's had it worse, but that doesn't mean your feelings are invalid. It doesn't mean your witnessings cancel out. Yeah, I just think there's a lot there. I don't really have
Cool.
any answers, but
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the lyric too. I'm gonna go listen
Thank
after
you.
our chat.
Thank you. I know, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
next time you hear it, you'll be like, do I feel anything now? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
That's cool, Emma. Okay, you're going through a power vinyasa flow practice. You're transitioning, I'm just making something up, from up
Yeah, go for
dog
it.
to down dog, and you feel like a sensation that just caught you off guard, and
Hmm.
a hamstring pop, a wrist pain.
Yeah.
And what do now currently
Mm.
in your current experience, like when you're feeling sensation in your body? I guess I want to ask this question because coming from my own personal teenage angst
Yeah.
experience when I went into yoga, then it was like
Yeah.
I dropped into Bikram yoga in 2000, which
Nice.
was like just a mad world, just a wild and crazy,
Hmm.
not trauma
Yeah.
informed
Yeah.
teaching. The
Sure.
opposite, if there was an opposite, in my opinion, that would have been it. And
Yeah.
push through your pain, push through your pain, push, push,
Hmm.
push, right?
Hmm.
And now I'm like, that's just not really how I go about it. What is your how is that evolving for you these days?
Oh, great question. Nowadays, there's a lot more stop and sit with and kind of figure out what I want to do for that particular example, right? Like a wrist injury.
Yeah.
However, what's fascinating is it's going to be different for me in my personal practice based on the shape and what I'm feeling. Something I've really enjoyed probably in the last like 5, maybe 10 years in my yoga practice, just getting really curious about is the both and that shows up in our body. I find this in a lot of
The both
leggy
and
postures.
is that what you said?
Yeah.
The
So,
both and?
yeah, places where we can be both something and something else. So, let's say you're in Warrior Two and you choose to keep your shoulders really soft. Your legs are grounded, rooted, fierce, maybe burning a little bit. And then you also have the softness in your body. And to me, getting curious about those moments is really reflective of in life where we have the space to change.
Mm,
Can we sit with the discomfort and also find, and it's also where I find like the space for human connection, right? Like, can we have a moment of discomfort between us, but instead of being fully on the tension, I'm going to get curious where there's softness if I'm safe and if I can stay present.
mm.
Um,
I like that.
yeah. So,
Good answer.
yeah, the yoga practice is like such a cool metaphor for, and it's going to be different, right? There's going to be times, a lot of my work has been really trusting my body. Like, if I know I need to stop, I'm going to stop. If
Yeah.
I know I need more intensity, I'm going to take it. I'm going to kind of trust what my nervous system is telling me. And that I think there's a lot of unlearning, especially if you've been practicing for 20 years and come from something like Bikram, because it's like the teacher knows best, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I love a set sequence. For me, it's more, I love Ashtanga. I love the rocket sequence. It's not my main jam, but I love to dabble. And I'm not going to lie, I don't want to use the word guilty pleasure because I think a lot of the folks still teaching like the Bikram style have reformed. A lot of them have changed their name, right, to like Hot 26 or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I love it. There's something about a set sequence where because you're
Yes.
doing the same thing, you can really witness different things showing up in your body. Um, yeah, have you noticed, am I allowed to ask you questions?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I
I was
would
hoping you
love
would.
to.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, good, good. I would love to know for you, like starting with that kind of yoga practice and just being someone so curious about this practice, right? You have a podcast about it. You're so curious and obviously love this practice so much. Like, how has that shifted for you through the years? And like, what have you seen?
Oh, thank you, for giving me the opportunity here.
No
The
problem.
Thank you. So my first experience with yoga was when I was 18. I started hanging
Mm,
out with the Hare Krishnas and the
mhm,
Krishna consciousness movement. So I
mm,
was more chanting mantra, doing sort of
mhm,
karma work with, getting they do all this free food at the university that I was staying. So I started taking
mhm.
Bhagavad Gita classes and all that sort of stuff. So
Wow, cool.
there was no asana happening. And then I
Yeah.
kind of got, like feel like with yoga, it's like we keep, like you just get into a whole new world of yoga or something. And so then when I started going to Bikram, it was like, whoa, what is this type of yoga? This is like totally
Yeah.
different,
Mhm,
really hot, really challenging. And I loved it because I just got such an incredible feeling, like just endorphin feeling, I think, from it, from the
mhm.
exercise element and the heat. Um, so fast forward to now, I actually went through a really interesting thing because at Bikram yoga teacher training when I was in California, there was 300 people in the room, and it was just a really large group, and there was all sorts of wild things happening. And 3 days in, I had a really horrific experience where I
Mhm.
dehydrated so badly that my whole entire body started cramping up from my toes and fingers all up
Wow.
toward my midsection. So I wasn't laying
Oh,
in the back of the
wow.
room
Mm,
screaming. I was like going, oh, well, that
mhm.
got everybody's attention, and they called Bikram over, and Bikram came and put his hand on my chest and shook me really hard and said, "Get up,
Mhm.
boss. Get up." And I was like, in that shock moment of like, how am I going to get up? Like, I can't even move right now. My body hurts so bad, but somehow
Wow.
it did reset my nervous system. And so then when I
Mm,
stood up, I was really like wah wah wah, like really
yeah.
kind of like spacey. And I feel like when you go into dehydration, it's a very kind of weird thing. Like you can't, it's just weird. It's
Mhm.
really uncomfortable. And after that, he just kind of turned to me and said, "You're the kind of person that's gonna get me sued." And I was like, dude, I don't even care about what are you talking about, man? And I
So
couldn't really
funny.
because I couldn't. So
Wow.
it's just a very so then
Whoa.
now I kind of went through a phase like I knew my wife and I owned a Bikram studio in San Diego, and so we were like,
Mhm.
we got to get out of here. This dude's gonna
Yeah.
go down, and we're gonna have his name on it.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
we sold that and moved over here to Juneau or in Florida, where we've been here for the last 17
Wow.
years, where we have a studio. But I stopped teaching Bikram and I stopped practicing it
Oh,
because I couldn't separate. Everyone kept telling me, separate the man from the yoga. They kept saying the yoga is great. So just take the gnarly parts of Bikram out and just do the yoga, right? And then I just couldn't do that. I felt like every time I went
yeah.
into the Bikram class, I just felt him. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't
Yeah.
separate.
After that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I completely stopped. I haven't gone back. And then it was interesting around COVID time, to hold a studio down through all that was really challenging financially. So someone came in and
Mhm.
said, "Will you do a 1 hour hot yoga class?" And I hadn't taught or took a Bikram class for like 17 years. So I thought, why not? Why not? I have it in there. I did it 100 million times over and over again. I might as well try it. So I
Mhm.
tried it and I was like, no, no, it's not for me
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess just to answer
Totally.
your question, that's been the evolution for me with it. But when you say I
Wow.
have this guilty pleasure of going, I
Yeah.
do want to go back again. Like I'd be
Mhm,
totally open to it. I
mhm.
know I could. It's just yoga. It's just breathing. I can separate now, I think a little better the intensity of the individual that first delivered it to me. I think I could separate it, but it's taken
Yeah.
me a little bit of time.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Todd.
Yeah.
I loved
Well,
hearing it.
thanks for asking.
Yeah, some pieces I found really cool and inspiring were that,
Yeah.
I mean, like, what a different group of different facets of exposure you've had to the yoga practice. And then what I love about your story, and I think we need to hear more of, is that, in this training, like, you were able to get back up. It was okay. You're not the person who sued him, even though that accusation, which is really harmful, happened. Like it's very much a story of we need to hear more stories like this because there's a lot of resilience there, right? Like this pretty yucky thing happened to you and you were okay and you did something so empowering and inspiring. You're like, okay, I'm going to look at, I love this practice. I want it in my life, but this doesn't feel right. Like, I don't want to be the shepherd of these kind of experiences. And I just, wow, like what a cool and inspiring story about how you've navigated the complexity and sifted through it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Emma. Well, thanks for yeah, I hear you. I mean, this is the cool thing about just keeping practicing, right? Like I've had some people say,
Yeah,
I don't know how I'm going to keep this up, but somehow I'm just so thankful for yoga. I can't even tell you how
totally.
amazing this whole thing is.
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of a left field conversation, but I see so many teachers burn out on their personal practices when they become
Mhm.
teachers. And it's your personal practice that it's being a student first to me that is everything and helps us, just that, right? Separate people from this practice, which is
Yeah.
so incredible. Because of
What?
course people are
Okay.
imperfect. So that's why we have this practice.
Yep. I thought it was really interesting reading in The Body Keeps the Score, we were saying that the first responders and the amount of stress
Mm-hmm.
that they encounter
Oh yeah.
in that field and the burnout rate.
Oh
And
yeah.
you're right. Like you wouldn't think as a yoga teacher, like why, like in the ideal, say rose-colored yoga teacher world, wouldn't we, you would start teaching and then why would you burn out? Like how could burnout even be a possibility
Mm-hmm.
if you're practicing yoga and breathing and taking care of yourself? But it's just not that simple, is it?
It's not, and I think in a lot of ways, just like how therapists are a different type of first responder, yoga teachers are too, because a lot of
Mhm.
folks come to the yoga practice. I think my, teenage, early 20s self is a great example. I didn't cognitively know that this practice was healing me. And it was. And I knew that I felt better and I just wanted to keep going. And
Yeah.
even if there's no discussion, there's an energetic thing that happens in yoga spaces. And it's really sacred and beautiful. And yoga teachers, I think, really need those self-care tools because even if it's pre-verbal, something really intense is happening in your presence.
Yeah.
And how cool
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah.
As well as how important is it that you also, take care of yourself?
Yeah. Well said. Oh my gosh, Emma. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and we're so close to our hour mark. And I'm feeling like we could just probably go for the 3 to 4 hour tour here.
Totally.
Yeah,
I
but
feel
maybe
it
we'll
too.
we'll
It's so
start with
nice.
session one, and then
Yes.
we'll 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 see what happens over the next few years, and if we'll look back on this conversation and we'll reconvene. But
Totally.
I'm curious. What did I miss? What do you want to add? What else do we need to know about you?
I don't think you really missed anything. This was just such a lovely conversation, Todd. It's really, and I loved hearing more about your story. I hope that's something I listened to a few episodes of the podcast. They're mainly
Thank
about
you.
the presenters, but I'm like, if you ever need someone to interview you, feel free to call me and I'll
Oh,
try
all
not to
right.
therapist you
Deal.
because you
No.
have such a cool story and it's been just so cool connecting with you. I really enjoyed this hour.
Why wouldn't you want a therapist to me?
Oh, I mean, I don't want a therapist
I
you. I'd
know.
have to be like
No,
interviewing
no,
and
I know.
not
I
like,
know.
tell me about your childhood. Tell me more. Because, yeah, it's really, that's what, I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's why
exactly.
I love being a therapist. It's so inspiring to hear people's stories and what
Yeah.
they do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
people always ask me, they're like, maybe this is a good, it's kind of in the therapy more than yoga point. I think this happens in yoga too. We just don't always know, but people are always like, oh, isn't it hard being a trauma therapist? Don't you burn out? I'm like, no, I'm inspired every freaking day by people
Mm.
who are so resilient and beautiful and empathetic and can do these incredible things and be inspired by, XYZ that may have happened. And yeah, it was really cool hearing your story and just such a joy to talk to you about all these things.
Well, thank you, Emma. I really, this has been a real pleasure. And Yeah, I can't wait till next time. I'll keep an eye out for you. I'd love to join in on one of your trauma informed trainings. So I really want to do that. You said
Mhm.
that we could provide some links for Yoga Alliance people that want to
Yeah,
get some free training. So I'll include those as well in the show notes. And
awesome.
please, everybody, go check out Emma on her website, which is in the link below. Super easy. Just click there, go have a look. If you're listening, you can watch us on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you could listen while you're driving, while you're walking, while you're cooking. Th- thank you, Emma. It's been a real
Thank you
pleasure.
so much, Todd. Such a
Thank
joy to
you.
meet you. Take care.
You too. Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.